You don't quite recognize the person waking up in your bed anymore. Something broke. A job, a marriage, a version of your life you were certain about. And the strange part is not the grief, it is the disorientation. You reach for the person you used to be, the capable one, the one everyone leaned on, and your hand closes on nothing. The motivation that used to move you is simply gone, and you cannot say why. You keep waiting to feel like yourself again, and every morning you don't. So you do the obvious thing. You try to rebuild. You reach for the old routines, the old certainty, the old you, because you were taught that this is what healing means. Getting back to who you were before it all came apart. That is the trap. The old self is not waiting somewhere to be restored. The old self is precisely what collapsed, because it had stopped fitting the person you were quietly becoming underneath it. Trying to resurrect it is not recovery. It is repetition. Let me stop explaining for a moment and tell you something I don't usually say out loud. There was a year I rebuilt the wrong thing. Everything I had attached my name to came apart, and I spent months trying to force my way back into the person I had been before the break. I called that strength. It wasn't. I was standing in an empty lot, hammering scaffolding back together around a building that was no longer there, because that is mostly what the old self was. Scaffolding. A structure you threw up early to protect something unfinished, to hold a presentable shape while the world watched, and climbed for so many years that you forgot it was scaffolding at all. You mistook it for the building, so when it finally comes down, it does not feel like losing a structure. It feels like losing yourself. But you have not lost yourself. You have lost the scaffolding. And there is a reason the psyche waited until now to bring it down. A reason that has nothing to do with punishment and everything to do with what it has been trying to make you see. That is where we begin. Think about the last time the drive simply went out of you, not dramatically. There was no scene. You woke up one day and the things that used to pull you forward had lost their grip. The goals felt borrowed. The routine felt like a costume you were tired of wearing. And the worst part was how quiet it was. No crisis loud enough to explain why you suddenly felt like a stranger inside your own life. That silence has a meaning, and Carl Jung spent his life decoding it. He did not see the collapse you are describing as a malfunction. He saw it as a message. When the distance between the self you perform and the self you actually are grows too wide, the psyche stops cooperating. It will not keep funding a life that no longer matches the person living it. The lost motivation you keep trying to fix is not the problem. It is the report. It is telling you the direction you are facing is no longer true. Jung knew this from the inside. When he broke from Freud, the man who had been his mentor, his anchor, his entire professional identity, he fell into years where nothing was certain and no familiar map applied. He did not rush back to who he had been. He stayed in the disorientation. He recorded it, drew it, listened to it, and the whole of his life's work grew out of the very period that, from the outside, looked like a man falling apart. He wrote later that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will run your life and you will call it fate. This is the part that disorients people most. The gap did not open overnight. It widened by millimeters, over years, every time you chose the acceptable response over the true one. Every time you said yes when something in you meant no. You did not notice it growing because each compromise was small. The collapse is simply the moment the gap became too wide for the structure to span. What feels sudden was actually a long time coming. This is not a breakdown, it is a correction. The fragmentation is not the structure failing, it is the structure being honest with you for the first time in years. The psyche does not break what still fits. Every void you cannot name is carrying a signal. If you only try to escape it, you will miss what it came to say. A collapse is not the end of the path. Sometimes it is the path clearing. But knowing the collapse means something does not yet tell you why it keeps happening, why people stabilize, recover, and break again in the same place a year later. There is a mechanism underneath it, something you have carried and fed your whole life, something that was quietly operating the version of you that just fell. Once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it. Notice what you reach for first when you come apart. You reach for the role, the capable one, the strong one, the one who has it handled, who does it right, who never needs anything from anyone. You do not just want to feel better. You want to be that person again, because without them you genuinely do not know who you are. Jung had a name for that person, the persona, the mask you assembled early and unconsciously in order to be accepted and wore so completely that you forgot it was a mask. You did not just use the role, you became it. You poured your sense of worth into it until the two could not be told apart. So here is the mechanism that has been operating on you. When the persona collapsed, you did not experience it as losing a function. You experienced it as annihilation. And your instinct, the moment the ground shook, was to rebuild the exact same structure as fast as possible. That instinct feels like survival. It is actually the thing keeping you trapped, because you are pouring everything you have into restoring a mask that stopped fitting long before it fell. Picture someone who spent 15 years as the person everyone could count on. Dependable at work, dependable at home, the one who absorbed everyone else's weight without complaint. When his health finally forced him to stop, he did not just lose his pace. He lost his sense of worth entirely, because every ounce of it had been wired into a single role. He was not weak. He had simply mistaken one function for his whole identity. So when the function went, it felt like there was nothing left of him. Every role you perfected, every expectation you quietly met, every version of you they applauded, none of it was the building. It was the scaffolding, and you have been trying to nail it back together in the dark. You are not grieving a self. You are grieving a costume. This is why willpower fails you here. You cannot out-discipline a structure that no longer matches who you are. You can only stop holding it up. What is too heavy to maintain was never meant to be carried this far. But the persona is only the part you can see. When it falls, it stops pressing something down. And what rises in its place is the part of yourself you have spent decades refusing to look at. This is where most people turn back. It is exactly where you cannot afford to. In the weeks after the collapse, you find you are not yourself in a second way. You snap at things that never used to reach you. You feel raw, reactive, ashamed of emotions you thought you had risen above. And you draw the obvious conclusion: the breakdown has made you worse. It hasn't. What you are meeting is the shadow. Jung's word for everything you exiled in order to keep the persona spotless. The anger you were not allowed to show, the neediness you taught yourself to hide, the fear that did not fit the image of the person who has it handled. You did not heal those parts. You buried them. And they stayed buried only as long as you had the energy to hold the lid down. The collapse took that energy, so now they surface, all at once. and you assume that means you are breaking further. And here is the hard turn. Your instinct is to push them back down, to get composed, to look fine again as fast as you can. Ask yourself honestly, how much of your energy this past month went into looking like you were okay? The recovery you are chasing is the very thing keeping you in pieces. Every hour spent performing wholeness is an hour stolen from becoming whole. Jung put it directly. You do not become whole by imagining yourself full of light. You become whole by making the darkness conscious, by turning toward the exiled parts instead of away from them. The reaction you are most ashamed of is not the enemy. It is the door. You cannot integrate what you refuse to look at. If this kind of thinking is useful to you, the ideas that don't get softened, the ones that actually ask something of you, subscribe to Wise Daily. That's what we're here for. But seeing the shadow is not the hardest part. The hardest part is what you have to do with it next. And at first it will feel exactly like the thing you have spent your whole life avoiding. Here is what comes next, and almost no one warns you about it. You stop fitting. Conversations that used to be effortless start to feel like a performance. The people who knew the old you keep reaching for a version that is no longer there. You speak less. You withdraw. And you begin to suspect that something is wrong with you for needing the distance. Nothing is wrong with you. What you have entered is solitude, and not the bruised, lonely kind. Jung saw a particular kind of withdrawal as sacred and necessary. A deliberate stepping back from the expectations of others so that you can finally hear yourself without their voices layered over the top. Without that distance, you get pulled straight back into the old patterns, because the old environment only ever knew how to relate to the scaffolding. So, the first real act of rebuilding is not to build anything at all. It is to let the old structure finish falling. You stop forcing answers about a future you cannot see yet. You stop manufacturing a stability you do not feel. You stop chasing a new goal simply to escape the emptiness. None of that is avoidance. It is how you finally disconnect from a mechanism that was running you on autopilot. In practice, this is smaller and quieter than it sounds. It is one evening alone that you do not fill with noise. It is a message you do not rush to answer. It is letting a silence sit in a conversation instead of performing enthusiasm you do not feel. Each of those is a brick you refuse to put back into the old wall. The discomfort of it is not a sign you are failing. It is the precise feeling of realignment. You are out of step with your old life because you are no longer the person who built it. The people who drift during this phase are not punishing you, and you are not losing them out of coldness. They were close to the role. When the role goes quiet, the distance that was always there simply becomes visible. Solitude is not the absence of people. It is the return of yourself. You cannot hear who you are over the noise of who you were. But solitude only clears the ground. It does not tell you what to build, and it does not touch the thing still burning underneath all of it. The pain you have been outrunning since the day this started. That is what we go into now, and it is the deepest part of the descent. There is a pain beneath the disorientation that you have been managing instead of feeling. You stay busy so it cannot catch you. You fill the silence. You call it tiredness, or stress, or just a phase. But in the quiet that solitude creates, it finds you anyway. And it is larger than you ever admitted. Jung did not treat that pain as a problem to delete. He treated it as psychic energy, something that does not vanish when you suppress it, but simply changes form, returning as tension, numbness, or the same self-sabotage on a loop. Bring it into awareness though, and that same energy becomes the fuel for everything that comes after. He wrote that there is no coming to consciousness without pain, and the pain is precise. It is carrying data. Disappointment is telling you an expectation no longer matches reality. Anger is telling you a boundary was crossed. The emptiness is telling you that a structure you built your meaning on has stopped producing any. Consider the person who poured years into a goal and felt nothing but hollow when he finally reached it. The pain was not failure, it was information. Proof that he had built the entire thing on what other people would think, and the moment their approval arrived, the structure had nothing underneath it. The ache was the data telling him exactly where his life and his truth had come apart. You were capable. You were reliable. You were everything they needed. And none of it ever reached the part of you that is now finally in pain. That part is the foundation. It was always underneath the scaffolding, waiting, while you spent your energy reinforcing the structure on top. The collapse did not create the pain. It uncovered the ground that was load-bearing all along. The pain is not the damage. It is the information. So you do something most people never do. You stop trying to feel better and you start trying to understand. You write down what actually broke, not the event, but the expectation inside it that turned out not to be true. You let the pain finish its sentence instead of interrupting it with distraction. What burns in you now is the foundation, finally uncovered. And when you stop running from it, when you let it tell you what it knows, something happens that you did not see coming. You stop trying to become anyone at all. That is the last turn, and it quietly changes what the word rebuilding even means. One morning, the panic to get back to normal is just gone. You are not fixed. Nothing has been restored, but you notice you are no longer straining to hold a shape for anyone. You make a small choice. You say no to something you would once have said yes to, and you do not explain it, and it costs you nothing. Jung called this individuation, not becoming someone better, not becoming someone new, becoming someone accurate, removing piece by piece everything that was never you, until what remains is simply true. You are not constructing a more impressive scaffolding. You are letting a structure grow, slowly, out of the foundation that the collapse uncovered. You will know it is happening by what fades. You feel less need to be understood. You feel less pull to prove anything. The exhaustion of meeting unclear expectations lifts, not because life got easier, but because you are no longer living against yourself. You still face difficulty. You simply stop manufacturing the same difficulty over and over. The choices feel almost too small to matter. A boundary held without apology. A mourning that belongs to you before it belongs to anyone else. But these small things are the new structure. Not announced, not performed, simply lived. You are no longer assembling an image for inspection. You are becoming solid from the inside. You do not rebuild the old self. You become accurate to the real one. This is the quiet authority that frightened people mistake for coldness. It is not coldness. It is a person who no longer needs the room's permission to exist. And it is available to you only on the far side of the thing you were most afraid would destroy you. The collapse was never the enemy. In its own brutal way, it was carrying you back toward a person you never got the chance to become. What collapsed was never you, only the scaffolding you mistook for a self. When everything falls, what is taken is rarely what you feared. What leaves is the shape you held for everyone watching. What stays is the ground it was standing on, which was you the entire time. What collapsed was never you, only the scaffolding you mistook for a self. If that landed, you already know it. Type, "I am the ground, not the scaffolding," in the comments. Not for me, but for you. And if this video gave you something real, please like it, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Wise Daily. Every video on this channel is built to give you one thing: the philosophical tools to live with more power, more clarity, and more intention. We'll see you in the next one. Jung showed us what falls and what remains. But there is one part of you the collapse drags into the light, whether you are ready or not. The part you have spent a lifetime refusing to meet. Jung called it the shadow. And what he discovered when he finally stopped looking away is where we go next.